Eat it, you mutt. It's your last meal. David's hand released the steak over the fence. The meat hit the grass with a wet thud. Chemical sweet. Wrong. In the shadows, Dim didn't move. The Belgian Malinois sat perfectly still, muscles coiled, ears forward. His eyes weren't on the food. They were on the man. Tracking. Calculating. Waiting for a command that would never come from a stranger. That's right. David whispered to the darkness. Go on. Eat. Silence. David checked his watch. Stephanie would be waiting. The renovation crew was coming at dawn. By morning, this would be over. The barking would stop. The neighborhood would thank them. And that weird loner next door would finally understand what happened to people who didn't fit in. He turned to leave. Behind him, in the stillness, Dim's eyes tracked every step, every movement, the way his handler had taught him, the way 20 years of operations had ingrained in both of them. Inside the house, a red light blinked on a night vision camera. Silas was watching. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. And if this story moves you, subscribe and follow this journey to the very end. Let's see how far this travels together. Silas Thorne heard the sound at 11:47 p.m. Not the sound of the meat hitting the grass. Not David's whispered threats. The sound that woke him was the one that wasn't there, Dim's bark. For 3 weeks, the dog had barked at the neighbors. Sharp. Precise. A warning. The kind of bark that said, I see you. I'm watching. Stay back. But now, silence. Silas's hand moved before his mind fully registered the threat. Nightstand drawer. Tablet. Security feed. The screen glowed blue in the darkness of his bedroom. 6 cameras. Perimeter coverage. Night vision. Thermal overlay. The kind of setup that made his property look like a fortress, because it was. Camera 3 showed his backyard. The fence line. And there, frozen in perfect stillness, was Dim. The Belgian Malinois sat like a statue. 70 pounds of controlled violence wrapped in tan and black fur. His posture was textbook, spine straight, ears forward, eyes locked on something beyond the fence. Silas swiped left. Camera 4. Thermal view. A heat signature moved away from the property line. Adult male. 6 feet. Moving with the casual confidence of someone who thought they'd just gotten away with something. Silas rewound the footage. He watched David Mason approach the fence. Watched him look around, checking for witnesses, checking for cameras, never once looking up at the dead tree where Silas had hidden the lens. Watched him pull something from his jacket. The meat. Even in night vision, Silas could see it was wrong. Too dark. Too wet. The way it moved when David tossed it. Heavy, saturated, poisoned. Silas sat up slowly. His hands were steady. 20 years in the shadows had taught him to keep his body calm even when his blood was screaming. But inside, something old and cold was waking up. The something that had earned him 3 classified commendations and a medical discharge he'd never wanted. He switched to live feed. Dim was still sitting, still watching the meat from 5 feet away. Not interested, not even tempted. Because Dim was a working dog. A military working dog. And working dogs didn't eat without permission. Not from strangers. Not even when they were starving. Good boy, Silas thought. Good boy. He pulled on pants, boots, a dark jacket. Muscle memory. The same routine he'd followed in Kandahar, in Mosul, in a dozen other places where the night meant danger and preparation meant survival. But this wasn't a compound in Afghanistan. This was Riverside Oaks, Pennsylvania. A quiet neighborhood with old houses and older trees. The kind of place where people complained about property values and lawn maintenance and dogs that barked too much. The kind of place where Silas had thought he could disappear. He'd been wrong. The grass was cold under his boots. Dim turned his head at Silas's approach, but didn't break position. Still watching. Still waiting. Release, Silas said quietly. The dog's posture shifted. Not relaxed. Dim never fully relaxed, but attentive, waiting for the next command. Silas knelt beside the meat. Even in the darkness, he could smell it. Chemical sweet. Antifreeze, probably. Mixed with something else. Rat poison, maybe. The kind of thing someone bought at a hardware store when they wanted to solve a problem and didn't care about the consequences. He didn't touch it. Evidence. Chain of custody. The handler in him was already building the case. Guard, he told Dim. The dog moved to position himself between Silas and the fence line, between his handler and the threat. The way he'd been trained, the way he'd done in a dozen real operations where the difference between position and death was measured in seconds. Silas pulled out his phone. Not to call the police. Not yet. First, he called someone who would understand. The phone rang 3 times. This better be good, Silas. It's midnight. The voice was rough, sleep-heavy, but alert underneath. Brian. Former unit. Current security contractor. The kind of friend who'd helped Silas set up his retirement and never asked too many questions about why a 38-year-old former operator needed a fortress in the suburbs. They tried to poison Dim. Silence. Then who? The neighbors. The developers. The ones I told you about. The ones who wanted you to control your animal. Brian's voice had shifted. The sleep was gone. The ones who said Dim was lowering property values. Yeah. Where's the meat now? Backyard. Untouched. Dim didn't take the bait. Of course he didn't. A pause. You got it on camera? Every second. Then why are you calling me instead of the cops? Silas looked at the fence, at the massive house beyond it, at the renovation scaffolding and the luxury cars and the lights that stayed on all night, because people like David and Stephanie Mason didn't worry about electricity bills. Because I tried calling the cops 3 weeks ago, when they threatened to handle the dog problem themselves. The responding officer was Leslie Morrison. You remember that name? Wait, Morrison? As in David Mason's sister-in-law. As in the city councilwoman who approved their zoning variances. As in the person who told me that if I couldn't be a good neighbor, maybe I should consider moving somewhere more suited to my lifestyle. Brian was quiet. Silas could hear him thinking, calculating. So the cops are out, Brian said finally. The cops are in their pocket. Which means you're on your own. No, Silas said quietly. His hand moved to Dim's head. The dog leaned into the touch. 70 pounds of loyalty and controlled violence. The last connection to a life that had meant something. I'm not alone, but I need help. What kind of help? Silas looked at the meat, at the cameras, at the house where a man was probably sleeping peacefully, thinking he'd solved his problem. The kind we used to give, Silas said, before we retired. Another pause. Then, I'll make some calls. TT's in Virginia. Layla's freelancing in Philly. I can have them there by morning. Good. Silas. Brian's voice softened. What are you planning? Silas stood. Dim rose with him, moving into heel position without being told. 20 years of partnership. First with other dogs, other handlers, other operations. Now with this dog. This one last mission. I'm planning, Silas said quietly, to teach these people what happens when you threaten an operator's dog. Without breaking any laws. Without breaking any laws they can prove. Brian laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. I'll be there by 0600. The call ended. Silas looked down at Dim. The dog looked back. Brown eyes. Intelligent. Waiting. You know what's coming, don't you, boy? Dim's tail moved. Once. Twice. Not a wag. Dim didn't wag like a pet. This was acknowledgement. Understanding. Yeah, Silas said quietly. Me too. He photographed the meat from 6 angles. Then he bagged it. Evidence. He'd find someone to test it. Someone who wasn't on the Mason family payroll. As he walked back toward the house, Dim at his heel, Silas allowed himself to feel it. The thing he'd been pushing down for 3 weeks while David and Stephanie had complained about his dog. While they'd threatened. While they'd made it clear that people like Silas, quiet, private, different, didn't belong in their vision of Riverside Oaks. Rage. But not the hot, explosive kind. The cold kind. The calculated kind. The kind that built operations and executed them with precision. David Mason had made a mistake tonight. He'd thought he was dealing with a weird neighbor who couldn't control his dog. He had no idea he'd just declared war on a man who'd spent 20 years in the shadows. A man who knew how to fight. A man who knew how to win. And most importantly, a man who knew that the best operations weren't won with violence. They were won by making your enemy destroy themselves. The morning came too slowly. Silas sat on his porch as the sun broke over Riverside Oaks, the bagged evidence on the table beside him, Dim at his feet. The dog hadn't left his side since the incident. Hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, just watched. Always watching. The way he'd been trained. The way all good partners watched over each other. 20 years of deployments. And Silas had never felt fear like this. Not in Fallujah when the IED took half his convoy. Not in the mountains when they were pinned down for 14 hours. Not even when the bullet shattered his shoulder and ended his career. Those were clean fears. Understandable fears. The kind you could prepare for. But this was different. This was coming home to find that the quiet life you'd built, the one thing you thought was safe, was under attack. And the enemy wasn't wearing a uniform or carrying an AK-47. The enemy was your neighbor. Smiling at you over the fence while plotting to murder your dog. Silas looked down at Dim. The Belgian Malinois looked back, those intelligent brown eyes holding a question Silas couldn't answer. Why? Asterisk. Why would someone do this? Why would they try to kill something innocent? Something loyal? Something that had never hurt anyone except in defense of others? Silas's hand trembled as he reached down to scratch behind Dim's ears. The dog leaned into the touch, a small whimper escaping. The first sound he'd made since sitting guard over the poisoned meat. I know, boy, Silas whispered. I know you don't understand. Neither do I. But he would. By God, he would. At 7:43 a.m., Silas loaded Dim into his truck along with the evidence bag. The veterinary clinic opened at 8, but Dr. Daria Chun had told him once, back when Dim needed his annual checkup, that she was always there early. The animals don't care about business hours, she'd said. And neither do I. He hoped she meant it. The drive took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of Dim sitting perfectly still in the passenger seat, watching the suburbs roll by. Houses with families inside. Kids getting ready for school. Normal people living normal lives. People who didn't know what it meant to watch a teammate bleed out. People who'd never had to make the choice between completing a mission and saving a friend. People who'd never had someone try to poison their dog. The clinic parking lot was empty except for a silver Prius. Silas recognized it. Dr. Chen's car. The bumper sticker read, "Who rescued who?" He'd never understood that sticker before. Always seemed sentimental. Naive. The kind of thing civilians said when they didn't understand that dogs were tools. Weapons. Assets to be deployed and managed. Looking at Dim now. This dog who'd sat in perfect discipline while poison sat 5 feet away. This dog who'd chosen loyalty over instinct. This dog who was all Silas had left of the life that mattered, he understood. The door chimed as they entered. Dr. Chin appeared from the back, lab coat already on, coffee mug in hand. She was maybe 40, Korean-American, with kind eyes that turned sharp the moment she saw Silas's face. What happened? Silas placed the evidence bag on the counter. Someone tried to poison him last night. The mug stopped halfway to her lips. What? Threw it over my fence around midnight. Meat laced with something. Dim didn't eat it, but his voice cracked. He hadn't meant for it to crack. But I need to know what it was. I need to know what they were trying to do to him. Dr. Chin set down her coffee and took the bag. Her hands were steady, professional, but Silas saw her jaw tighten as she examined the contents through the plastic. This is sick, she said quietly. This is really sick. She disappeared into the back. Silas heard cabinets opening, equipment running. Dim sat at his feet, pressed against his leg, and Silas realized the dog was trembling. Not from fear. From the same thing Silas was feeling. Rage mixed with helplessness. The knowledge that someone had tried to hurt him, and he couldn't fight back because he didn't understand why. Silas knelt down, wrapped his arms around Dim's neck, and for the first time since his medical discharge, he let himself cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears that soaked into Dim's fur while the dog sat perfectly still, accepting the grief the way he accepted everything, with patience and unwavering loyalty. I'm sorry, Silas whispered. I'm so sorry I brought you here. I thought we'd be safe. I thought we could just exist without someone trying to hurt us. Dim's tail moved. Once. A small acknowledgement that meant more than words. I know. It's okay. We're together, asterisk. Dr. Chun returned 20 minutes later. Her face was pale. Antifreeze, she said. Mixed with berdificum. That's a blood thinner used in rat poison. Whoever made this knew what they were doing. This wasn't just cruel. It was calculated. She paused. If Dim had eaten this, he would have died slowly, painfully, internal bleeding over several days. By the time you noticed symptoms, it would have been too late. The words hit Silas like physical blows. Slowly, painfully, too late. Why? The question came out raw. Why would someone do this? Dr. Chin's expression shifted. Something that looked like recognition. Like she'd been waiting for someone to ask this question. Can I show you something? She asked. She led him to her office. The walls were covered with photos. Happy dogs with their families, cats curled in sunbeams, a horse nuzzling a child's hand. But she pulled out a drawer and removed a folder. Inside were different photos. Animals in distress, medical reports, and a map. 3 months ago, Dr. Chun said, a golden retriever named Bailey died 2 blocks from your house. The owners thought it was old age. I did the necropsy, found berdificum poisoning. She pointed to a red X on the map. 6 weeks ago, a cat named Whiskers. Same thing. Same poison. Another X. 4 weeks ago, a mixed breed named Charlie. Same poison. Same death. She looked up at Silas. Every single one of these animals lived within 3 blocks of properties recently bought by Mason Development Corporation. Every single one of them died within 2 weeks of their owners refusing to sell. The room felt like it was tilting. You're saying this is systematic? I'm saying someone has been removing obstacles. Dr. Chin's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she laid out the evidence. I reported it to animal control. They said they'd investigate. That was 8 weeks ago. I haven't heard anything. And the animals keep dying. Silas looked at the map, at the red XS marking small graves, at the pattern that emerged when you knew what to look for. His property was right in the middle. Did you know any of these families? He asked. I knew all of them. Bailey's owner, Mrs. Patterson, was 73. That dog was all she had after her husband died. After Bailey died, she sold her house and moved in with her daughter. The Martins, Whiskers' family, they had 2 kids who loved that cat. After it died, they couldn't handle the grief. Sold and moved to Ohio. Charlie belonged to a veteran, like you. Guy named Marcus. After Charlie died, Marcus. She stopped. Marcus isn't doing well. Last I heard, he was in the VA hospital. Psychiatric hold. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. These weren't just pets. They were family. They were anchors. They were the things that kept people connected to life when everything else felt overwhelming. And someone was systematically destroying them to clear land for luxury developments. I need to make a call, Silas said. Outside, with Dim at his side, he dialed Brian's number. It rang once. I'm 15 minutes out, Brian said without preamble. TT's with me. What do you need? I need you to hear something. Silas put the phone on speaker and asked Dr. Chun to explain again. Everything. The pattern. The poison. The family's torn apart. When she finished, Brian was quiet for a long moment. Jesus, he said finally. This isn't just about property. This is psychological warfare against civilians. Yeah, Silas said. We're not letting this stand. No, Silas agreed. We're not. He hung up and looked at Dr. Chun. Thank you. For keeping track. For caring when no one else did. Someone had to. Her eyes were wet. Someone had to witness what was happening, even if no one was listening. Silas understood that feeling. He'd spent 20 years in places where terrible things happened and no one back home wanted to hear about it. Where the price of freedom was paid in blood and trauma and broken souls, and the world just looked away. Not this time. This time, someone was going to listen. If this story is touching your heart, please leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if you've ever felt helpless watching someone you love suffer. You're not alone. And neither is Silas. Brian and TT arrived as promised. Brian was the same as Silas remembered. Solid, dependable, with eyes that missed nothing. TT was smaller, quieter, but Silas had seen her take down men twice her size without breaking a sweat. They were good people. The kind who ran toward danger when everyone else ran away. They brought equipment. Lots of equipment. Phase 1, Brian said, setting up a laptop on Silas's kitchen table, is about asymmetric response. They try to kill Dim. We don't kill them. We make them think they're losing their minds. TT pulled out what looked like a small speaker. Ultrasonic frequency disruptor. Humans can barely hear it, but it creates a sense of unease. Anxiety. Makes you feel watched even when you're alone. We use these in psychological operations overseas. You want to gaslight them, Silas said. I want to give them a taste of what they've been doing to this neighborhood, Brian corrected. They've been making people feel unsafe in their own homes. They understood how that feels. They spent the afternoon setting up tiny cameras in the trees overlooking the Mason property, directional microphones, the frequency disruptors positioned to activate during specific times. Late at night, when David and Stephanie would be trying to sleep, during their garden parties when they wanted to impress their wealthy friends. The beauty of this, TT explained, is that it's completely legal. We're not trespassing. We're not threatening. We're just adjusting the ambient environment. That night, the Masons were having one of their famous parties. Silas could see the lights from his porch, hear the laughter, the clinking of expensive wine glasses. The kind of celebration people had when they thought they were winning. At 9:47 p.m., TT activated the disruptors. The effect was subtle at first. Through the surveillance feeds, Silas watched as guests started shifting uncomfortably. Looking around, one woman put down her wine glass and rubbed her temples. A man kept glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting to see someone behind him. David noticed. Silas watched him move through the party, trying to maintain his smile, but his eyes were scanning, searching for the source of the discomfort. He wouldn't find it. That was the point. By 10:15, 3 couples had made excuses and left early. By 10:30, the party was over. Through the thermal cameras, Silas watched David and Stephanie stand in their empty garden, surrounded by abandoned plates and half-full glasses, looking like people who'd just realized their fortress had cracks. How does it feel? Silas whispered to the screen. How does it feel to be unsafe in your own home? Dim pressed against his leg. Not celebrating. Just present. Just there. Brian put a hand on Silas's shoulder. This is just the beginning. Tomorrow, we expand the grid. We track every phone call, every meeting, every transaction. If they're doing this to other families, we'll find the evidence. And then we bury them. Brian's voice was quiet but certain. Not with violence. With truth. With proof they can't deny. We're going to take everything they've built and show the world what it cost. TT was already typing, code scrolling across her screen. I've got their Wi-Fi, their security system, their smart home network. Every device they own is now an open book. She looked up. Did you know Stephanie searches for animal poison suppliers at 2 a.m.? Did you know David has a folder on his computer labeled Problem Properties with your address at the top? The evidence was damning, and it was just the beginning. That night, as Silas lay in bed with Dim curled at his feet, he thought about the families Dr. Chun had described. Mrs. Patterson, grieving her golden retriever. The Martins, consoling children who didn't understand why Whiskers wasn't coming home. Marcus, broken by the loss of Charlie, now trapped in a psychiatric ward because the one thing keeping him tethered to life was gone. He thought about all the times he'd wanted to give up. After the injury, after the medical discharge, after realizing that the world didn't know what to do with broken soldiers who couldn't fight anymore. Dim had saved him, not dramatically, not heroically, just by being there, by needing him, by giving him a reason to get up every morning. The thought of someone trying to take that away, trying to leave him as hollow and lost as Marcus, filled Silas with a cold fury that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice. If you've ever had an animal save your life, not from physical danger, but from the quiet despair of feeling useless, please share this story. Let the world know that these bonds matter, that they're worth fighting for. The next morning, Silas did something he'd been avoiding for 3 weeks. He got dressed in clothes that weren't tactical gear or workout sweats. He put on khakis and a button-down shirt. He even shaved. I'm going to try the proper channels one more time, he told Brian and TT. Before we go further, I need to know if there's anyone in this town who actually cares about the law. Brian nodded. Document everything. Record the conversation if you can. Silas drove to the police station with a folder full of Dr. Chen's evidence, photos of the poisoned meat, timestamps from his security footage. Everything organized. Everything clear. The kind of case that should be impossible to ignore. The desk sergeant took his information and directed him to an office in the back. Officer Leslie Morrison. Community Relations. The moment Silas saw her face, he knew. She had David's eyes. The same cold calculation. The same smile that didn't reach the depths. Mr. Thorne, she said, gesturing to a chair. I understand you have a complaint about your neighbors? Silas laid out the evidence. Every photo. Every timeline. Dr. Chen's necropsy reports. The pattern of dead animals and displaced families. Leslie listened with the expression of someone who already knew how this conversation would end. I see, she said when he finished. This is certainly concerning. However, I have to point out some issues with your evidence. She tapped the photos. These animals died of poisoning, yes. But can you prove where the poison came from? Can you prove anyone from Mason Development was involved? I have video of David Mason throwing meat over my fence. Do you have video of him poisoning it? Do you have a chain of custody showing that the meat you bagged is the same meat he threw? Do you have any evidence beyond circumstantial that connects these deaths to my... She stopped. Caught herself. To the Mason family? The slip was intentional. Silas understood that now. She wanted him to know. Wanted him to understand that the system wasn't neutral, that justice wasn't blind, that people like him, outsiders, loners, veterans with PTSD and dogs that barked, didn't get to challenge people like her family. So you're saying, Silas said slowly, that there's nothing you can do. I'm saying that without concrete evidence of a crime, there's nothing I can do legally. She leaned forward. Mr. Thorne, I understand you're upset. I understand that transitioning to civilian life can be difficult for someone with your background. But making accusations against prominent community members isn't the way to handle neighborly disputes. Neighborly disputes. Silas repeated the words like they were in a foreign language. Perhaps if you worked on being a better neighbor yourself, keeping your dog quiet, maintaining your property to neighborhood standards, you'd find that people would be more welcoming. She was blaming him, blaming Dim, suggesting that somehow they deserved this because they didn't fit the image of what Riverside Oaks should be. Silas gathered his papers slowly, methodically, the way he'd been trained to stay calm under fire. Thank you for your time, Officer Morrison. Of course. And Mr. Thorne? She smiled. If you continue to have problems with your neighbors, you might consider whether Riverside Oaks is really the right place for you. There are plenty of rural areas where a man and his dog can live without bothering anyone. Translation, leave, or we'll make you leave. Silas drove home in silence. He didn't trust himself to speak. Didn't trust what might come out if he opened his mouth. When he walked through his door, Brian and TT were waiting. They saw his face and understood immediately. She's family, Brian said. Not a question. Sister-in-law. Jesus. Silas sat down heavily. Dim immediately moved to his side, pressing against his leg. The weight of the dog was the only thing keeping him grounded. We're on our own, he said quietly. The cops won't help. The city won't help. The system won't help because the system is theirs. TT looked at Brian. Something passed between them. Some decision made without words. Then we stopped playing by their rules, TT said. We stopped trying to work within a system that's rigged against us. We build our own case, gather our own evidence, and when we're ready, we take it to someone who can't be bought. Who? Silas asked. Brian smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Every corrupt system has someone watching it. Federal agencies that don't answer to local politicians. Journalists who've been waiting for a story like this. Watchdog groups that specialize in exposing corruption. We're going to build a case so airtight, TT continued, that when it goes public, there won't be anywhere for them to hide. Not the Masons. Not Officer Morrison. Not anyone who's been helping them terrorize this community. Silas looked at his teammates. These people who'd come when he called. Who'd dropped their lives to help him fight a battle that wasn't even theirs. Why, he asked. Why are you doing this? You could walk away. This isn't your fight. Brian knelt down, looked Silas in the eye. You remember Kabul? When that building came down and I was trapped under rubble for 6 hours. Silas remembered. He dug with his bare hands until they bled. You didn't leave me, Brian said simply. You didn't walk away even when command said I was probably dead. You stayed. You dug. You didn't stop until you pulled me out. He put his hand on Silas's shoulder. I owe you my life. But more than that, I know you. I know that if you lose Dim, if they win, you won't survive it. Not really. And I'm not losing my brother to these people. TT nodded. Besides, she added, her voice softer, I lost my dog 3 years ago. Cancer. I would have given anything to have more time with her. The thought of someone deliberately taking that away from someone else. She shook her head. That's not happening. Not on my watch. If you've ever had friends show up when you thought you were alone, friends who refuse to let you fight by yourself, comment below. Let them know they matter. Let them know their loyalty changed everything. The war wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. But for the first time since finding that poison meat, Silas didn't feel alone. He had his team. He had his dog. And he had something the Masons would never understand. He had people willing to fight not for money or power or property, but for something simpler and infinitely more valuable. For loyalty. For justice. For the belief that some things were worth protecting, even when the cost was high. Especially then. Dim looked up at him, those brown eyes steady and trusting, waiting for the next command, ready for whatever came next. Together, Silas thought, whatever happens, we face it together. And that made all the difference. They came on the third night. Silas was ready. He'd known they would come eventually. Men like David Mason didn't accept defeat gracefully. They escalated. They doubled down. They brought in people who solved problems with violence because that's what people with money did when they couldn't buy their way out. The motion sensors picked them up at 2:17 a.m. 4 heat signatures approaching from the back of the property, moving with the kind of deliberate stealth that suggested military training, or at least people who thought they had military training. Silas watched them on his tablet from the darkness of his bedroom. Dim was already on his feet, silent, waiting for the command that would tell him what kind of threat they were facing. These weren't amateurs. They'd disabled the exterior lights, cut the power to what they thought was his security system, not knowing that Silas had redundant power sources hidden throughout the property. They carried weapons, not guns, probably too smart to bring firearms to what would officially be called a property dispute, but batons, tasers, zip ties. The kind of tools people brought when they planned to hurt something and take it away. Silas's blood ran cold when he saw what one of them carried. A catch pole, the kind animal control used. The kind shelters used when they needed to restrain a dangerous dog. They weren't here to scare Dim. They were here to take him. For a moment, just a moment, Silas felt the old instinct surge through him. The part of him that had spent 20 years being a weapon. The part that knew exactly how to neutralize 4 hostiles with extreme prejudice. The part that whispered, asterisk, they're threatening your dog. They're invading your home. You have the right to defend, asterisk. But he also knew where that path led. They wanted him to react with violence. Wanted him to be the crazy veteran who attacked innocent security professionals who were just doing their job. It would be the perfect excuse. The perfect justification for everything they'd done and everything they planned to do. So Silas made a different choice. He opened the program TT had installed. The one that controlled the smart lights, the speakers hidden in the trees, the subsonic emitters positioned throughout the property. The one that turned his home into a haunted house designed to terrify without ever making physical contact. Phase 2, he whispered to Dim. Shadow protocol. The dog understood. Moved to position by the door. Waiting. Watching. Ready but not aggressive. The perfect balance of controlled violence that every good K9 achieved after years of training and trust. Silas activated the sequence. The first man reached the back fence. Started to climb. And that's when the whispers began. Not loud. Not obvious. Just barely audible. Voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Words that didn't quite make sense, but triggered some primal unease in the human brain. The man froze halfway over the fence. Looked around. Saw nothing. His radio crackled. Status. I heard something. What? I don't know. Voices maybe. Stop being paranoid and move. The man dropped into Silas's yard. Immediately, the motion-activated lights didn't come on, but infrared illuminators did. Invisible to the human eye, but turning everything into a nightmare landscape for anyone wearing night vision. Which, of course, they were. Through his thermal camera, Silas watched the man rip off his goggles, blinded by what looked like blazing white light in his enhanced vision. Lights, the man hissed into his radio. They've got IR floods. I'm blind. Fall back. Regroup. But they didn't fall back fast enough. Because that's when Dim started moving. Not attacking. Not even growling. Just moving. Shadows within shadows. The dog was black and tan, perfectly camouflaged in the darkness, and he'd been trained for years to move through hostile territory without making a sound. One of the men caught a glimpse. Just a flash of eyes reflecting in the darkness. Contact. I've got. He spun, raising his baton. Swung at empty air. It's circling us. The dog is circling. Then grab it. That's what we're here for. The man with the catch pole moved forward. Extended the pole toward where he thought he'd seen movement. And that's when the subsonic emitters kicked in at full power. The frequency was too low for human ears to properly hear, but the body felt it. In the bones. In the chest cavity. A vibration that triggered every prey instinct humans had spent millions of years developing. The instinct that said, predator nearby, run, hide, you're being hunted. All four men felt it simultaneously. Silas watched their body language change on the thermal cameras. Watched them unconsciously huddle together, back to back, weapons raised against an enemy they couldn't see. This is wrong, one of them said. His voice was shaking. Something's wrong here. It's just a dog and some weird lights. Man up. No, you don't understand. This feels, he spun again. Did you hear that? Hear what? Breathing. Something's breathing right behind me. There was nothing behind him. But Dim was moving again, staying just out of sight, and Silas had activated the directional speakers positioned around the yard. The ones that created localized sound. Breathing. Footsteps. The soft click of claws on concrete. Always just behind them. Always just out of sight. One of the men broke. Just turned and ran for the fence. Scrambled over it so fast, he left his radio behind. Marcus, get back here. But Marcus was gone. The remaining three tried to hold formation. Tried to complete their mission. But Dim was in their heads now. Every shadow could be him. Every sound could be an attack coming. The subsonic frequency was making them nauseous, disoriented, their own bodies betraying them. One of them vomited. Fell to his knees. Abort, the leader finally said. Abort. We're not equipped for this. They retreated, dragging their sick companion, leaving behind their equipment. Running from a threat they never saw, never touched, but felt in every nerve. Silas watched them flee. Watched them pile into their van parked 2 streets over. Watched them drive away like they were being chased by demons. He looked down at Dim. The dog looked back. Calm. Professional. A warrior who'd done his job perfectly without ever engaging the enemy. Good boy, Silas whispered, his voice breaking. Such a good boy. Because that's what it had come to. Defending their home like it was Fallujah. Using tactics designed for war zones on American soil. All because some wealthy couple thought a barking dog was beneath their property values. Silas gathered the equipment they'd left behind. The catch pole. The zip ties. The tasers. Evidence of intent. Evidence of conspiracy. Evidence that would mean nothing to Officer Leslie Morrison, but would mean everything to the right federal prosecutor. As he bagged the items, his hands were shaking. Not from fear. From the weight of understanding that this was his life now. That peace wasn't waiting at the end of service. That the war followed you home, and sometimes wore expensive suits instead of enemy uniforms. Dim pressed against his leg. 70 pounds of loyalty reminding him that he wasn't alone. That some battles were worth fighting even when they never should have been necessary. If you've ever felt like the world was against you. Like the system meant to protect you had been bought and paid for, share this story. Let others know they're not crazy. That corruption is real. That sometimes the only option is to stand and fight. The next morning, Layla arrived with devastating news. Stephanie Mason has been married 4 times, she said, spreading documents across Silas's table. Each marriage ended with insurance fraud, house fire, boat accident, art theft. And in every case, pets died first. Prize dogs, cats, birds. All dead weeks before the big claims. The silence was crushing. She's killed animals for money, TT said quietly. For 6 years across 3 states. Layla's voice was steel. The FBI's been building a file. They just needed someone to connect it to David's property schemes. Silas thought about Bailey and Whiskers and Charlie. About all the animals who died for Stephanie's greed. All the families destroyed. We document everything, he said. Every family. Every animal. When this goes public, the world needs to know. That night, he sat with Dim on the porch, watching the Masons celebrate in their mansion. I'm sorry, he whispered. I thought we'd be safe here. Dim's tail moved once. Trusting. Loyal. But they're not going to win. I promise you that. If you have a dog, if you've ever looked into their eyes and seen unconditional love, take a moment right now and tell them they matter. Because that's what Silas couldn't promise Dim. And it's breaking both of them. The eviction notice came 3 days later. Fake legal language. Forged signatures. But convincing enough. Pursuant to City Ordinance 847.3, all dangerous animals must be removed within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in forcible removal and destruction of said animal. Destruction. They'd written it plainly. The notice demanded Silas appear at town hall. Prove Dim wasn't dangerous or watch him die. It was obviously a trap. They wanted him to lose control, to become the unstable veteran who couldn't be reasoned with. But Silas had walked into traps for 20 years. The trick was knowing and walking in anyway, with a plan. They want a hearing, he told his team. Let's give them one they'll never forget. They spent 2 days organizing every piece of evidence. Every document Layla had uncovered. Every surveillance video. Every recorded conversation. Not a defense. An execution. The night before, Brian looked at him seriously. What if they still try to take him? The room fell silent. Then they go through all of us, Brian said. And they're not going through us. Silas lay awake that night, hand resting on Dim's side, feeling each breath. Tomorrow we finish this, he whispered. And I promise, you're going home with me. They're not taking you. The dog settled, trusting the promise. Silas hoped he could keep it. The town hall was packed. Silas walked in at exactly 7 p.m. with Dim at his heel, Brian and TT flanking them, Layla somewhere in the back with her laptop and a wireless hotspot. The room fell silent. Every seat filled. Every eye watching. The council sat at a raised table in front. 5 members. All of them wearing the kind of bland expressions that suggested they'd already decided how this would go. Officer Leslie Morrison sat to the side, in uniform, projecting authority and impartiality she didn't possess. David and Stephanie sat in the front row, dressed like they were attending a charity gala. Confident, comfortable, already celebrating their victory. They had no idea. Council Chairman Peters banged his gavel. We're here to address a complaint regarding a dangerous animal at 847 Riverside Drive. Mr. Thorne, you have 15 minutes to present why your dog should not be classified as a public menace and removed from the property. 15 minutes. They'd given him 15 minutes to defend Dim's life. Silas walked to the podium. Dim sat at his heel, perfect posture, eyes forward, the picture of discipline and control. Thank you, Chairman Peters, Silas said quietly. But I'm not here to defend my dog. He doesn't need defending. He's never attacked anyone. Never bitten anyone. He's a trained working dog who has saved more lives than most of the people in this room. Mr. Thorne. What I'm here to do, Silas continued, his voice steady, is present evidence of a criminal conspiracy involving members of this council, city employees, and private citizens who have systematically terrorized this community for financial gain. The room erupted. Peters banged his gavel. Mr. Thorne, this is not the forum for. This is exactly the forum. Silas pulled out a remote. The screen behind the council flickered to life. Because you made it public. You wanted witnesses. You wanted official record. You're going to get both. The first video started playing. David Mason, clearly visible in night vision, approaching Silas's fence, throwing something over. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m., 3 weeks ago. This, Silas said, is David Mason attempting to poison my dog with antifreeze and burdificum. A forensic analysis confirmed the poison. The vet's report is in your packets. David was on his feet. This is ridiculous. I was. The second video started. David and Leslie Morrison in a coffee shop, voices clear through Silas's directional microphone. We need that property, David's recorded voice said. Do whatever you have to do. Make up an ordinance. Fake a complaint. I don't care. Get rid of the dog and the freak who owns it. Leslie's voice. I can't just. You can. Your family. You owe us. The room was dead silent now. Silas advanced to the next slide. Photos of Bailey, Whiskers, Charlie. These are 3 animals who died of the same poison near properties Mason Development wanted to acquire. There are 17 more. I have documentation for all of them. He looked at Stephanie. And speaking of documentation, Mrs. Mason, would you like to explain your 4 previous marriages? The insurance fraud in Nevada, Florida, and California? The FBI is very interested in speaking with you. Stephanie's face went white. Silas kept going. Evidence. Timeline. Recorded conversations. Bank transfers showing payments from Mason Development to council members. Zoning variances that shouldn't have been approved. Families displaced. Lives destroyed. All of it documented. All of it time-stamped. All of it undeniable. And through it all, Dim sat perfectly still at his heel. Not a threat. Not a menace. Just a good dog waiting for his handler's next command. Silas's voice never rose. Never wavered. He presented the facts with the same calm precision he'd used for mission briefings in Kandahar. Just the evidence. Just the truth. When he finished, the room was silent except for the sound of Layla's fingers typing in the back. Uploading. Publishing. Sending everything to every media outlet she could reach. Chairman Peters looked like he was going to be sick. This is highly irregular. What's irregular? Came a new voice from the back. Is a city council holding sham hearings to cover up criminal activity. FBI Special Agent Diana Webb walked down the center aisle, badge held high. Behind her, 6 more agents. Behind them, reporters with cameras. David Mason, Stephanie Mason, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit animal cruelty, insurance fraud, and attempted theft. Leslie Morrison, you're under arrest for abuse of office and conspiracy. Webb looked at the council. The rest of you might want to get lawyers. Federal prosecutors have some questions about those zoning variances. The room exploded. Reporters shouting questions. Cameras flashing. David trying to run and being tackled by federal agents. Stephanie screaming about her rights. Leslie just sitting there, staring at nothing, her career and freedom evaporating in real time. Through it all, Silas just knelt down and put his arms around Dim. It's over, he whispered into the dog's fur. It's over, boy. You're safe. You're home. No one's ever going to hurt you. Dim's tail wagged. Just once. But it was enough. If you've made it this far, if this story has touched your heart, please don't just scroll past. Share it. Tell people. Let them know that corruption can be fought. That loyalty matters. That sometimes the smallest among us teach us the most about courage. And please, if you've never subscribed before, subscribe now. Let's build a community of people who believe in fighting for what's right. The weeks that followed were a blur. Trials, testimonies, news coverage that went national. The Masons lost everything. Their house, their money, their freedom. Stephanie's insurance fraud alone earned her 15 years. David's conspiracy charges added another 10. Leslie Morrison was disbarred and sentenced to 5 years. 3 council members resigned. 2 faced federal charges. The entire city government was turned upside down as investigators uncovered decades of corruption. But the most important thing, the thing that mattered more than all the convictions and reforms, was the families. Mrs. Patterson came to visit Silas one afternoon. She was 73, frail, with kind eyes that still held deep sadness. I wanted to thank you, she said. For Bailey. For proving that what happened to him wasn't just bad luck. For making them pay. Silas invited her to sit on his porch. Dim immediately went to her, rested his head on her knee. She cried and petted him and told him about Bailey. and Dim sat perfectly still and listened the way only dogs can. The Martins came next, with their 2 children who'd never gotten over losing Whiskers. Dim played gently with the kids, let them pet him and hug him and bury their faces in his fur. Their parents stood watching, tears streaming down their faces, finally finding closure. Marcus came last, released from the VA hospital, still healing, still fragile, but alive. He and Silas sat on the porch without speaking for a long time. Dim moved between them, leaning against first one, then the other, sharing his warmth, sharing his presence, being what dogs had always been for soldiers, a reminder that there was still good in the world worth protecting. I couldn't save Charlie, Marcus finally said. I should have known, should have seen the signs, should have protected him. You couldn't have known, Silas said quietly. None of us could have. They were too good at hiding. But you figured it out. You stopped them. No, we stopped them. All of us. Everyone they hurt. Everyone who refused to forget. Silas looked at him. You survived, Marcus. That's what matters. You're still here. And that means Charlie didn't die for nothing. Because you're going to help make sure this never happens to anyone else. Marcus looked at Dim. The dog looked back. How? Marcus asked. However you can. Volunteer at the shelter. Foster animals who've been abused. Tell your story so others know they're not alone. Silas paused. Or work with me. I'm starting a program. Training service dogs for veterans. Matching animals who need homes with people who need purpose. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. Charlie would have liked that. The program started small. Silas and Marcus working together. Brian and Titi helping with training. Dr. Chin providing veterinary support. Layla handling the legal and organizational structure. They called it Charlie's Legacy. Within 6 months, they'd placed 12 dogs with veterans who needed them. Within a year, the program had expanded to 3 states. Within 2 years, they'd helped over 100 people find their way back from the darkness. But the moment Silas treasured most, the moment that made everything worth it, came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon 6 months after the trial. He was sitting on his porch with Dim when he heard laughter. Children's laughter. He looked up to see 3 kids from the neighborhood approaching nervously. Mr. Thorne? The oldest, maybe 9, was holding a hand-drawn card. We made this for Dim. To say thank you for being a hero. Silas took the card. It showed a dog with a cape, standing guard over a house. The words Hero Dog Dim were written in crayon at the top. Can we pet him? The youngest asked. Silas looked at Dim. The dog's tail was wagging. Actually wagging. Like a pet. Like a normal dog who enjoyed the company of children and sunshine and simple affection. Yeah, Silas said, his voice thick. Yeah, you can pet him. The kids surrounded Dim, gentle and reverent. The dog sat perfectly still, tail wagging, accepting their love with the same discipline he'd shown in combat and crisis. And Silas understood. This was what they'd been fighting for. Not revenge. Not victory. This. Peace. Home. The ability to sit on a porch while children petted your dog and neighbors waved as they walked by. The simple, profound gift of being allowed to exist without fear. Dim looked at him across the sea of small hands. Those brown eyes held something Silas had never seen before. Contentment. The dog was home. Finally, truly home. Not just a place to sleep between deployments. Not just a fortress to defend. Home. Where love lived and loyalty was rewarded and good dogs got to be heroes without having to fight. As the sun set over Riverside Oaks, Silas sat surrounded by children's laughter and Dim's gentle presence, and the quiet knowledge that some battles, the ones fought for love and loyalty and the simple right to live in peace, were worth every moment of struggle. He thought about all the families who'd suffered, all the animals who'd died, all the pain the Masons had caused. And then he thought about the program they'd built from that pain, the veterans who'd found purpose, the dogs who'd found homes, the community that had learned to stand together against corruption. Darkness had come to Riverside Oaks, but light had pushed it back, not through violence, not through revenge, through something simpler and infinitely more powerful, through people who refused to accept that cruelty should win, through animals who showed humans what loyalty really meant, through the understanding that home wasn't just a place, It was the people and animals you loved enough to fight for. Dim's tail thumped against the porch as a little girl hugged him. Silas smiled through tears he wasn't ashamed to shed. They were home. Finally, completely, safely home. And that was everything. If this story has moved you, if you felt the weight of Silas and Dim's journey, please do one thing before you go. Look at the animals in your life. The dogs, cats, birds, whatever companions you've chosen or who've chosen you. Look at them and understand. They love you without condition. They trust you without reservation. They would fight for you without hesitation. They deserve the same from us. They deserve our protection, our loyalty, our willingness to stand against anyone who would hurt them. Be their voice. Be their defender. Be worthy of their love. And if you don't have an animal companion, consider opening your home to one who needs you. There are thousands of dogs like Dim waiting in shelters. Thousands of animals who could change your life the way Dim changed Silas's. Don't wait. The love of an animal is a gift we don't deserve, but desperately need. Thank you for reading. Thank you for caring. Now go hug your dog. They've been waiting.